Hi, it's Warren Huart here with Produce Like a Pro. Hope you're doing marvelously well. Today I'm with my friend Barry Rudolph. How are you, mate?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let me tell you a little bit about Barry. Barry was probably one of the first guys to make me even think about doing things like this. He doesn't even know this. We haven't talked about this. But in 2008, I think it was, the second Frey record came out and it went straight into #1. And how did you get my number?
It was through API's press company, press relations. They wanted a write-up about the 1608 because it had just come out and the Frey bought one. And they wanted a whole story about the console. And I had done a review or was about to do a review for it for Mix Magazine.
And so he calls me up out of the blue and he goes, Warren, I just looked you up and you have all these incredible credits and you have a #1 record and yet nobody knows who you are. It was pretty funny. I mean, it was pretty much like that.
Yeah.
He's like, you have a #1 record, but nobody knows who you are. So let's try and do something about that.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, you pretty much, in many ways, I was just like a lot of us, just working in isolation in the business, you know, toiling away in the studio.
Came up to your studio. You had a place in Laurel Canyon?
Yeah, I have a place in Laurel Canyon, but you came to my old place, which was in Hollywood, and I actually had an API 20 channel falling apart console. But my friend Hunter, of those of you that are gear sluts will know his round badge.
Oh, okay.
Hunter Crowley. You know.
Okay.
And Hunter was one of the first people, if not the first person, to buy a 1608. He was like in the first 2 or 3.
Wow.
So he was
brave
the one.
Man, huh?
Brave man. Hunter told me about the 1608.
Yeah.
We had been in Sausalito for 3 months battling the console there at the plant. And so we had gone back to Denver and we had to make a record in their studio. But of course, they just had a whole bunch of outboard.
Right.
And so that's how we ended up with the 1608. I don't work for API. I don't get paid by API.
Yeah. Neither do I.
But it was at that time, it was like a kind of a groundbreaking console because not only was it a 16-channel console that sounded amazing and, you know, discreet with those incredible 2520s and all the things you want, but it had so many ways of working.
Yeah. It's if you fully do a full patch bay on that board, there's some amazing things you can do. Like you can do the mic pre and the channel, in other words, like the SSL, where you have the channel and the monitor path in the same strip. You can do that on that board if the patch bay is.
What I was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I had a band essentially playing live.
Yeah.
So I had some 3124s. I had 4 of those. So I had 16 channels of other. So I had 32 channels. And I was sitting there and I was recording the band live, monitoring back through the console, bussing and summing, because I double mic, obviously, a bunch of stuff, the toms, top and bottom.
You have 8 buses,
I mean, it was incredible what I could do with it.
Like I say, if you know signal flow, and you have to know that, and the bay is wired, you can get out all those things, and they all work at the same time.
Yeah, it was crazy. That console was just like every single button and control of that console was utilized.
Yeah, that's good. It's a small footprint, not very big.
Oh yeah, it's about this big.
Well, bigger than that.
Is it about that big?
No, it's a little bigger.
Maybe that. Yeah,
a little big.
It's a good size. See, he knows. I was on it for 9 months, but
it probably shrunk. You got tunnel vision.
Yeah, exactly. But a great console.
It is. They really sound great.
Anyway, that was just a sideline story. So that's kind of how we met through that, and he introduced himself and really helped me on this kind of path that we're on now. But those of you that know Barry's name will probably know it from the fact that you have done a million reviews and you know gear probably better than anybody. As far as I'm concerned, I read your reviews all the time.
Thank you. That's nice.
If I've got a really dumb question, you'd be the first person I would ask.
Sure. I'm good at those dumb ones. The questions.
But let's talk a little before we get into the gear stuff, because you've got a great studio here in your house. It's fantastic. I think it would be really wonderful for people to understand how to have a studio in your house. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your history, because the first thing I remember was like, you know, growing up as a kid in England, I remember the hit Rock On by David Essex. Yeah. So the first thing I knew your name from was from David Essex, Rock On. Yeah,
well, Rock On, I met David. I had a #1 record in about 1972, believe it or not, and the record, they did a live show, TV show at Capitol Towers, and it was my record, which is Al Wilson, Show and Tell, and David Essex had his Rock On, and he had that hit, and we were both on the same sort of TV show.
Right.
And so David was they were trying to get that sound, that record is founded on that slap, that delay. Yeah. And the Capitol engineers couldn't get it going. They didn't know what to do. So I got in there and I said, well, you got to, it's a tape slap and the whole track is on that. And so they figured I finally got it going. And so he was very thankful about that. And so that's when I met him. And then later on, it turns out I did a cover of that song with another artist. And we were sitting there duplicating all those sounds because they wanted pretty much that slap. It's all built on that.
Right. What can you, tell us a little bit how you did the slap.
Slap is tape echo with VSO. So you use the VSO, so you're setting the delay time.
That's great
stuff,
Yeah, I think Jack Douglas told me when I was mixing with him once about Imagine with Roy Cicala.
Right.
The story, they finished Imagine, Roy mixed it. Because in those days, this is an important thing to know when you're up and coming now. When these days you go back and you look at credits from the 60s and the 70s. Mm-hmm. People don't know that guys like you were working on these records because most of the time they were never credited.
You didn't get credits, no.
You didn't get credits.
Yeah.
So, he worked on these great records and had #1 singles, but you won't find it in All Music pre-1980.
Yeah. The other thing that's probably lost is back when I started, the tracking engineer did the whole record, including the mix.
Of course.
The mix is just what you did after you ran out of tracking. You just started, okay, tomorrow we're mixing. So it wasn't really the separation it is now where you have a mixing engineer and all these different people. It's just like the same guy.
I think Jack told me that they were making, I don't know which, they were making probably rocks or toys. Yeah. No, it was later than that. It was late 70s, Draw the Line or something like that. Mm-hmm. And Bruce Springsteen was in one room. They were in another one in New York, probably at the record plant, I assume. Mm-hmm. And Bob Clearmountain had just set up his room. Mm-hmm. And the story goes, this is what Jack tells me. I'm sure that you can all leave questions and comments below and tell me whether I'm right or wrong. But this is what Jack told me. He told me that Bob came down to Bruce and whoever was producing him and said, I hear you guys are a little behind. Yeah. In your album here, and you've got to make a delivery date. Why don't you give me a handful of the songs to get started and mix, and that will help you meet your deadline? Wow. That's the story Jack told me, and that was kind of what he attributes as the birth of the mixer, where it was like to help make the deadline,
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I
don't know how true that is. Please let me know.
Well, the record company has to have a deadline, for promotion to start and release dates and money and all those things. So, yeah.
It definitely happened with me with the Aerosmith record. But Neil, who's a good friend of mine, started mixing the album before we finished. And then I mixed the other half after he finished.
Of course, nowadays, the beauty of Pro Tools is that you can now mix the song in parallel, the whole album, let's say in parallel, I call it. Whereas when I started, you would mix song 1. Put it to bed, everyone's happy, song 2. It was rare that you got down to song 4 or 5 and said, I think we could do better on song 1. Let's go mix song 1 again. Because nobody does anything over again, that was it was done. Sure. Now with Pro Tools, of course, you can mix each song in parallel. So you could be working on song 1 and then say, I'm kind of tired of hearing this. Command S, save it.
Yep.
Go to song 2. And this is something I discovered mixing a Pat Benatar record a few years ago because Neil, he would say, that sounds pretty good. Let's work on this other one. I go, okay. And so I had all 12 songs, all kind of at different states of completion. Right. And of course, the beauty of that system is you might discover something on song 10, I don't know, a guitar sound or maybe a vocal trick. And you go, God, that would sound really good on song 2. And of course, with Pro Tools, you can import back to song 2.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Yeah, so.
I remember what was it, like 2004 or 5 when they first had that feature where you could import settings and that. Yeah. It was like, sky opened up.
You have your certain sort of baseline mixer set up, and it's great. Your certain reverbs and all that stuff that you like to use, and delays. So.
Yes, templates in Pro Tools is like a godsend.
Yeah. Not much on them yet. I'm going to be more with, I import chunks from different mixes. Like I really like that reverb sound on a whole other project, and I'll import that. The template thing I'll have to get in more when I get the Sigma fully functional, so that'll be a template. Right. Plus all this would be on the template too. These all run as inserts, so.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So before we move on to some of the gear stuff, because I'd love to talk about your selection of gear, because the thing about Barry, because he does review equipment, and he's really good at it, and he knows equipment.
Thank you.
Because of all those things, I know, and I looked, we came in here, we looked at everything you've got choice gear, like the best of the best, as far as I'm concerned, stuff that we use. So I know everyone's going to be very interested to see what you choose. Because, I've used hundreds of pieces of equipment. You've used thousands and thousands. You
There's
get
a lot of choices, So
I know people will love to know what you personally choose, given the fact that you can choose anything.
Thank you.
But I'd love to know a little bit more, because I didn't know that you'd worked with Tom Dowd.
Yeah, Tom Dowd, I did. I met Tom Dowd through Steve Cropper. That was a time when Steve was doing a lot of...
Sorry, my hairs are standing on end. Steve Cropper, favorite guitar players ever.
Steve and Tom Dowd had just done Atlantic Crossing with Rod Stewart. And
amazing album.
Yeah, so Steve was in LA, moved to LA, and was partners in a studio called Clover Studios on Santa Monica Boulevard. They had a Clover console. Anyway, we would work there, and I met Tom Dowd. He was, Ahmet Erdogan asked him to produce this Texas, kind of Texas swing, shuffly kind of band. And I just remember being in there with those guys and the just classic things that Dowd would say. We were in there for 3 days tracking, and he wasn't saying anything. He was just saying, basically calling take numbers, and he would write out his chart. So after about 3 days, Tom pushes on the talkback and he goes, you guys play pretty well. These are pretty good songs, but, it doesn't sound like your life depends on you playing this, yes or no. I'm not hearing that in the performances. I'm just hearing you guys kind of step through it. And I just always remember that, because they didn't have a passion. They just sort of like stepped through the song. They didn't have a passion in the playing.
Right.
And he did it as a favor to Ahmet. I don't remember the name of the band. I don't know what happened to it, But anyway, that got me with Tom Dowd, and I got a call from Tom. I was going through a divorce and house changes and all that kind of turmoil. And he called up and he says, "Why don't you come up to Canada and work with Rod Stewart and me?" Because he has this sort of this East Coast kind of accent. It's funny.
Right.
And so I flew up to Toronto, and we started an album that was going to be, the album was called Footloose Fancy Free, and it had, the single was Hot Legs. So I went up and did four songs, including Hot Legs, up there in Canada, and that was my intro. And then that project changed because Andy Johns got his visa cleared, and he got into the country, and Rod wanted to come back to LA to finish the record at Cherokee. And so I was out, Andy was in, and Tom said, I'm gonna be late with this Rod. He's running over, I'm gonna be late. Look, I gotta start an album on Monday with these guys, Leonard Skinner. Go on down there and hang out with them. He says, they're just overdubbing. Just sit with them and just do some overdubs or something, So I go down there, and I get down there, and Leonard Skinner, it was for the Street Survivors record, and I got there, and I'm sitting. I remember sitting on the hotel bed with Ronnie Van Zant and Gary Rossington, and Ronnie's going, "Man, we cut all this stuff with Dowd at Criteria. We think it's crap." He says, "We don't like the sound. We don't like our performance. We don't like any of it. We want to do it all over." I go, "Okay." So I call up Dowd. I call up Dowd. I go, "Houston, we have a problem." No, I said, "Gee, these guys want to cut all this stuff all over again. What am I supposed to do?" And he goes, "Oh," because Tom, if anything, was the most blue sky. No matter the place could be burning down. I mean, and he's always so blue sky. And he would just say, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, go ahead and cut some tracks. Have a good time. I got to go." So I go in there on Monday morning, and we started cutting tracks. And it was kind of like Ronnie kind of ran the show. They had their own engineer, Rodney Mills. They had their live guy, and I said, "What am I doing here?" I mean, and I was sort of the guy that kind of like cracked the whip, if you will, just sort of kept him on point,
right?
And I had some ideas about a song called "That Smell." I just heard it. I heard it like Hotel California, for lack of a better prototype. Right. But I heard, because it was about drugs and dying and stuff like that, and that's what Hotel, So the 3 guitar players, like the Eagles at that time, and so I sort of approached it just using that as a prototype.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What credit did they give you on the album?
Well, that's an interesting thing. What happened was I was with him for a week, and I had a prior commitment. It was one of those regrets you have sometimes. I should have blown that off and stayed with him.
Right.
Because what happened was they had a falling out with Tom Dowd. He said no, his name is not on the record. And I talked to him, and I said, well, I was there as an engineer, but I didn't really do much engineering. I just sort of like watched over and made sure the drums sounded great and the guitar players, and they played well and all that kind of stuff. What is that? He goes, well, I'll give you a special engineering credit.
Special engineering.
So I have one line, my own line, and what happened was they met an old high school buddy who ended up finishing the record. He ended up getting co-production on it, and I think he got 3 points, which that's a triple platinum album, so.
Nice. Hey, it's still great to be involved in it.
Yeah, no, I'm not, one of those things.
Right.
So, yeah, it was quite an experience. Those guys about killed me. Start the session at 3 p.m.
Right.
The drill.
Yeah. Work through the night.
Work through the night, and then you think you can go back to the hotel. No. Dowd says, when you get down there, rent a car. And I go, okay. And then I knew why. None of those guys in Leonard Skinner at that time were allowed to operate any kind of machinery. None of them had any driver's license. They were not allowed. So guess who gets to be the chauffeur?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So
I'm driving these guys around Doraville area in Georgia, and at that time they had a what do you call it, curfew. The bars.
So you had to drive from different counties.
Right. They had dry counties and wet counties, and some of them
closed at different times.
Yeah, and of course we closed all of them. And we get back to the hotel about 10 a.m. Those guys about killed me.
Did you know Don Smith?
Yeah, I met him. Yeah.
I did an album with Don when I first moved here.
Yeah.
So October '95, I landed. The second day I was here, I was making a record. Don was the producer and engineer.
Yeah.
And as you know, an amazing.
He's good. Atlanta Rhythm Section. Did that have something to do with that? Maybe no.
Possibly. I mean, he died about 3 years ago now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But he did all the big Tom Petty stuff in the 80s and 90s after Shelley did, obviously. Shelley Yackers did, Refugee, Down the Torpedoes area. But then Don took over after that and did all those great records. And did Traveling Wilburys.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Wonderful engineer and a great producer as well. Mixer as well. He mixed Touch Myself, remember them by the Divinals?
Yeah, sure.
Great talent. And he told me when he was doing the Stones records, because he was Keith's guy, because he had done
a lot of stories.
Main Offender.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much about the parting as such. I've heard those stories from Dave Jordan on Dirty Work of the parting. Yeah. But the fact that they work different hours. Yeah. So he said Mick is like super healthy.
Comes in early probably.
Exactly.
I worked one day with him,
Yep, so he'll be in 10 a.m. downbeat working. So everybody has to be there 8, 9 o'clock in the morning getting ready. Yeah. Mick arrives at 10, then works to about 6.
And then he's out.
And then he leaves, and then Keith arrives and wants to work through the night.
Yeah.
So all the production stuff are like going on like 2 hours of sleep.
Yeah, you really need a couple. You need a couple of crews for that.
Yeah,
that deal. Yeah.
So it's always interesting with bands, and especially successful bands like Leonard Skinner and the Stones and stuff. That having a.
Well, Skinner at that time, Skinner they told me straight up at the hotel. They said, "Well, we have the band has made a decision. There's going to be no hard drugs or hard liquor." During this session, during these album,
for at least a day.
We put our foot down. So I said, that's thinking to myself, good to know.
Yeah.
And of course, the first day we go in there, they had this cooler that had everything else, And
so it was just full of beer. So that
beer,
wine,
beer
was okay.
So it was anyway.
Oh, the wonders of the old.
When you're
the
young,
old days of
young
rock
and
roll.
crazy. Yeah.
So you got some great experience there. I love your gear reviews, and I love the fact that I can ask you absolutely anything about gear. So why don't we do some of that? Asking you about gear.
Sure, love to.
Let's check out what you've got going on. One thing I noticed straight away.
Yep.
As you know, I'm a huge fan of Sunset Sound and do a lot of tracking.
Yeah, we get all the way. Yeah, right here. Yeah.
You've got a pair of their pre's.
Yeah. This is the sort of a version of the original Sunset Sound preamps, APIs that were in that Frank DiMedio console. These have the gain selector, and then the output, like the fader. In other words, like the fader on the board would be down here, the output. Then you have your gain steps, and this is just like the boards if you've worked at Sunset.
Oh, many times.
Yeah.
Love it.
So the point with this is, if you look at it, there's no pad, there's no attenuator pad, because you're just setting the proper amount of gain for what you're recording. So if you have a really hot microphone, this thing will go all the way down to well, if I go all the way down to -6, I'm at 10, -6, it's +4. So,
right.
So I can go all the way down to line level, and then of course, and all the modern mics these days are all really hot output. All the new mics, seems like it's like a thing, are all these loud. So I can just use the amount of gain I need, and so it's John Hardy 990 amplifiers in there. It's all the transformers that they use back on those boards.
Jensen transformers?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're Cinemag, I believe.
Cinemag.
I have to look that. I look at my own review to check that. But there's 3 transformers, a mic in, and an output transformer, 2 transformers, no line in, and an instrument input from the front. You can plug the mic or the front. So they sound really good. They have I think of it like this, they have an extra bottom and top octave, is one way to look at it. When you listen to them, they're more open on the top, and they're more the low end comes in on them.
Some of my favorite drum sounds like it. But the reason why I go there every time, and I use the 2 rooms I use are 1 and 3, which have these preamps in there. Yeah. And it's as much the console as it is the room.
Yeah.
Obviously the rooms are, incredibly famous rooms that have made some of the best sounding records of all time. Obviously that's a big, huge part of it.
Yeah.
Zeppelin and the Stones and Janis Joplin and Prince and all that stuff.
This is that exact sound like in those boards.
Wonderful.
The preamp that they use, yeah.
And then next you've got retro there.
Yeah, it's called a double-wide, that meaning it takes 2 slots.
Yep.
It's got 4 tubes in it. It's a compressor, and I like to use it for things like bass or a guitar, stuff like that. And it's in the 500 rack, so it's a real tubey. You can get a lot of gain, a lot of compression with it. So it has that sort of thing. It's not an optical. It is a variable mu style, like the Sta-Level. So it's not optical. So it's that.
So is it kind of a baby version?
A lot of people it tends towards that, but it's nothing like the size and the stage of that Sta-Level. That Sta-Level is a monster. You could use it the same way, but the Sta-Level is just like a big sound. Not that this isn't, but I mean.
Just flipping to the Sta-Level for a second, what's your favorite uses for that?
That would be vocals. Right. Like if I have all the lead vocals, I would bust together and send it out to that from Pro Tools and back in, and it's great for that. Recording bass guitar is good, or recording a vocal with it is great, because literally you can compress 40 dB if you wanted to. And it it's insane. This needle can be down here and just like hovering the whole time, yet it's so clean and transparent, it doesn't sound squashed in a way. I mean, it is compressed. Obviously, it is being compressed, but
it doesn't feel choked.
Not at all. And the release time is not a linear release. In other words, it comes up and then it goes faster. It's a logarithmic. So it can release all the way to the next phrase, if you will.
Right.
So, and you have these different modes: double wide, recovery time, which is release, and it uses the same tube that the Fairchild 6386 in there.
Can you explain the single, double, triple mode?
These are sort of setup, attack, and release times. You get different combinations by selecting these, and then this is attack really, and then you have your release time.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So going back to the 500 series rack there, I see you have a pair of BBE Sonic accelerators.
Yeah, they do something. A lot of people swear at them. I don't know. I like them.
No,
swear by them.
So tell me.
Well, they just do something. They're like an active EQ. They just sort of sparkle. When I use them, I just touch it. They just barely go, and they add a.
And where are you putting them on?
things like, well, they sound good on acoustic guitars if you're looking for a real bright,
percussiveness.
Yeah, that kind of a thing. Or I'm hesitant about drums and that such, but keyboards, fantastic on keyboards, stereo keyboard tracks.
Right.
Such as pads that tend to be a little dark coming out of the box. And so you end up usually EQing them. This sort of applies the EQ in kind of a dynamic way.
Right.
And you have a bass. Actually, the bass EQ on it is kind of cool when you turn that up.
Right.
Not something you normally reach for. But
I've never really used even the hardware version, so I'm excited to see them. I'll have to try them out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing. It's another thing, another sound. So.
Right, but it's interesting to see the combination of things you've got. Now, underneath, what do we have there?
This is Ingram. This is a 2-channel mic pre. It's a variable impedance. It uses FET, field effect transistors, so it's a different kind of sound than other transistor preamps that don't use FETs. It's a different sound. It has variable impedance, so you can match the input to the microphone more carefully, especially useful for old ribbon mics like a RCA 44 or 77, which are very low impedance mic. And by loading or unloading the microphone, you get a different sound, kind of like your the difference between your single coil and your humbuckers that load the front end of the amplifier like a Marshall and a Fender. The front ends are different. The majority of the sound is there that happens in the amp, and it loads the pickups. Passive pickups get loaded, and you know what happens. It gets dark and kind of sludgy sounding when they're loaded. Same thing with a microphone you can do with that.
That's wonderful.
So, it also has a DI and a high pass and a boatload of gain, a lot of gain. Pretty quiet. So it's 2 channels.
I've never actually, to be honest, that's completely new to me. I've never even seen one before.
It's Eric Ingram is from Atlanta area.
Right.
And
I'm going to have to read a little bit more about it. I'd like to actually try one of those.
Oh, you're welcome to take this sometime and give it a whirl. It's a big unit.
It's definitely a big unit. And then underneath, what's the RTZ?
RTZ is RTZ Audio, another Atlanta boy. These 2 guys are friends actually, Eric and RTZ, Bobby Starr. What he has here, Bob Starr, RTZ, he's also has NASA aerospace electronics experience like I do, and he built a preamp. This is a 1272, but built with mil spec parts and better components. So it's the 1272 sound, just like a Neve.
Better components than a 1272?
It's the same circuit.
Wow.
But better transformers, a few features. For example, it has a DI, which is a FET, very high impedance. And it also has an interesting switch that not many people know about. It has a switch right here. It says termination.
Yep.
Kind of one of the big threads on the gear sluts is this idea of a lot of units are not terminated with a 600 ohm source, the output of boxes. Neve always had a termination, but most would cut it out. When you cut off the termination, it opens up the top end. But there's some other technical reasons why you should have the termination, especially for driving long lines. This fella put a switch in, so you can switch it in and out.
Oh, wow. When you say better transformers, what does he put in?
Well, they're made better, they're bigger. I don't know the brand, but you'd have to look in there. But this thing sounds like the world's best 1272.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So you have the same amount of gain, the output control, a meter, overload. You have a
low
impedance for the DI.
And then the polarity.
The polarity, all those buttons, yeah.
It's nice that he calls it polarity rather than phase.
Yeah, polarity is correct, yeah.
Yes.
So,
and then the Millennia, I actually do know that.
Well, the Millennia is another choice, no transformer. So when you use a preamp like that has it's a direct coupled amplifier like a GML preamp, no transformers at all. And I find that the Millennia, I use that when I measure my room with the measurement microphone. I use it for bass. It's great for synthesizers. It just has a very direct sound when you do that. No coloration, just like they say, pure gain with a wire, just straight piece of wire with gain, they call it. So it has that facility.
And then the Creation Audio Labs?
That's Michael Wagner's kind of had an idea. Creation Audio is a company that makes this, and that you as a guitar player would like this. This allows you to route your guitar signal around your studio. For example, and you might want to study this sometime when you have a minute, but
fantastic.
But essentially what is possible with this, or any number, if you look on the back, any number of setups. For example, reamping, you can use this to reamp. You can plug your guitar into this and supply up to 4 amplifiers at the same time, have them all mic'd. And it also has impedance matching for all the amps. So if you have a Marshall, you have a Fender, you have a Gibson, they all have different input impedance that has impedance adjustments for all the different amps.
I think what I would do is I would buy it, and then I would have you pay you to come over and set it up for me.
One of the cool things you can do with it, you'll like this, it has +4 XLRs on so you can literally, and this is the coolest sound in the world, and I'll tell you right now, you can actually play through something like an 1176, but like a pedal on the front of your amp, as if you would use a
wow.
But you're playing, so in other words, this thing
exciting.
Yeah, this thing will match the level and the impedance so that you can drive the 1176, it comes back and goes into the box and goes out to your amp, and so as if you're using the 1176 like a stomp pedal. And let me tell you, you have not heard a stomp pedal that sounds like that. I mean, so anyway, that's one of the many things you can do with this guy.
Yeah, $1,500 worth of compressor on the front end of your, as opposed to your $100.
It's just again, it's another thing. It's just another thing.
Well, so. Brian Kolstrom, I'm sure you knew Brian.
Sure.
An old friend of mine unfortunately died recently.
Yeah.
He loved plugging in a guitar. I can't remember what we did, but we'd always plug in the front of that and then drive the input up.
Oh yeah, it's an awesome sound. It makes those little stomp pedals sound, wimpy comparison, just like really.
But this is obviously a better way still.
Yeah, this matches it all up level wise. It comes back. It's all like, good.
Is it expensive?
It's not crazy. I think this is, could be wrong. I think it's in the $700 area.
I mean, that's not cheap, but that's not unbelievably expensive.
It does a lot of things. Reamping, you can reamp 2 different amps. You've got a lot of, it's an interface.
I agree. I mean, if you can afford to have 4 independent amp setups in your studio, you can afford to have
literally, you could play through all 4 at the same time, have a proper signal going to each one, and then have them all mic'd. I think I'll try the Marshall. I think I'll try the Fender. I think I'll try,
Does Joe Barresi know about that? Because maybe he has one. So it seems like a very Joe Barresi kind of toy.
He might. Yeah, it's a good box. So.
Joe with his 700 amps, 2,000 guitars or whatever it is.
So,
well, that's wonderful. And then, so underneath we have
this is
Aphex.
It's an 8-channel bump box that enables me to listen to the Mac audio. It bumps everything to +4.
Oh.
So I have a turntable I bring out, and it plugs in there and it comes out +4 straight into Pro Tools, or the output of the Mac, the sound output of the Mac goes through there. For example, if you wanted to watch a YouTube video and hear it on these monitors, it bumps it up to +4. So it's 8 channels.
I need that. With my SSL, I've got my, my 1/4 inch, my 3.5 mini, whatever, all these different stuff, and everything's all over the place.
Yeah, that's a perfect use for it. You would put a panel with an 1/8 inch, like at school at MI. The students bring in their laptop with Logic on it or something, and we have bump boxes in all the rooms, and they just plug in, and they get it right up on the monitor, and
it's the same level in every one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, that's a wonderful thing. And then, just as a sideline, you're a guy that knows your equipment. You're using Glyph. Do you find those to be the most reliable drives?
Well, they're all either, they have Seagate or Western Digital inside of them. So a Glyph is just the packaging, really. They build the frame, the power supply.
Is it a Seagate or Western Digital? Do you know?
These are vary. I think.
They vary.
They vary. I think this one is I believe this one is a Seagate. That's a 2 terabyte in there. The rest are 1 terabytes.
I just bought 2 terabytes yesterday. Two 2 terabytes. Of the Glyph. So I always wondered.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the retro. Obviously, 1176. Is that a particular vintage?
It's a D. Revision D is the one to own if you're talking vintage. I believe.
Okay.
D is when they did the reissue. When UA did the reissue, I reviewed it for Mix, and I wrote a what do you call it? A history, a revision history, all the way from version A, and then through all the way to, I think they're out to H now, I believe. And what the differences were in all those boxes. And in D is when they use an input transformer and an output transformer. And the E is the same box, except it runs on 240 or 120 volts. That's the only difference. And then from F on, they changed the output circuit. They went with a different output circuit, and I don't even know if they use an input transformer. So the reissue is just like the D. So if you're going to buy one of these things, I would get the new one. If you buy a new one, then you'll be getting a D. This is an original D. I got this from Neil Giraldo and Pat Benatar.
It's in great condition. I wasn't sure if it was new or old.
Well, it was broken and I fixed it. So they had it. They have a stack of this stuff. I mean, he probably got 8 of these things, and this one was dead. And I said, let me take that thing. I think I could fix it, and I was able to fix it.
Wonderful.
So,
and then below, 165.
The 165. That is a 165, not an A. The difference between a 165 and a 165A, the A has peak stop. It has like a peak.
I have one of those. I just turn it off.
Yeah. This is without that circuit, so some feel like it's a better sound. Of course, it's a VCA based.
Yeah.
FET based. Variable mu. These all work differently and compress the audio differently. And this is, of course, a VCA. DBX made their history with the voltage-controlled amplifiers. So.
I mean, that's what the SSL uses in its mix bus.
Right.
A DBX VCA.
Yeah. So it is a sound, a different sound. Each one of these do the same work, as it were, but sound mostly different because of the way they change the gain.
Now, underneath,
that's a 50s AM864U that I refurbed. It was a rust bucket, and it's one of the little hobbies I have. I refurb this stuff, and it's a compressor.
That's a huge compressor.
Yeah, uses.
Wow. I've never even seen it.
AM864 is a Cold War relic, 50s vintage. This one.
That's crazy.
This one was. This box was probably used in a camp for the PA system, a big compressor, and it's sort of like.
Can it drive a mic as well?
No, it's actually
There's enough gain.
It's a lot. Well, no, actually it has too much gain. I actually had to reduce it. It's for a different busing. It's like for +8, strapped for +8 or something crazy level.
I've never seen or even heard of that.
It directly drives either a radio transmitter or a PA system in a camp. So I fixed it up, retubed it, uses really ancient old Lochtel tubes. They're even before octal tubes, they're called Lochtel. I mean, really old tubes. And
Incredible.
I put, these knobs are on the back, I put them on the front, and I put a destruct switch just for fun.
And what do you use it on? What do you love it on?
It's great for bass.
Wow.
It's kind of a colorful, effecty thing for vocals. It's only got one control, really, this.
Wow.
And it sounds.
Whether it's got that one control, so what do these two do?
Well, these were on the back of the unit, and I moved them to the front and I put period correct chicken heads on them just for look. Actually, one of them is the tube bias, which affects the sound by changing it. Normally, it's not something that you would adjust every day, but I put them on the front just to vary the sound a bit.
Wonderful. And then we have the Hafler underneath, which
is
is
headphone amp. Well, actually, it's running the NS10.
It's running the NS10
right now. I'm looking for another one for my headphones. I have 2 headphone systems, and I need another. So yeah, the Eventide DDL-500. They sent me one of these to review and try out, and this harks back to the original DDLs that they made. It's a 500 unit, and you have to set the delay time. You have feedback. You can turn it on and off. You can put an insert within the delay. And it's just a nice thing to have in the rack that isn't a compressor or an EQ or something, so nice.
It's great. And I mean,
I think it does over a second or so.
Over a second?
Yeah, and you have a tap if you want to put it in time. You can tap one of these taps. You can tap, and here it is. This one, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So you can just tap it in
and tap it.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so it has all those kind of, like what we have become known for, what plugins have become known for. I just need another slot for it.
I really feel like I'm trying to encourage people when I get asked a lot. People ask me about, a lot of mid-level equipment, and I'm always trying to say, just get one or two high quality things, and then I think, well, what's the best option? And for me, if I was starting up and I wanted to be serious about this, I would probably get a 500 series rack as soon as I can, because I feel like, you can buy, 1073s now, high quality ones at about $800 or $900. You can get stuff anywhere from like $300 to plus, and you're saving on all of the casing and the power supplies.
You're not buying the power supply. Every one of these has a power. You're not buying that over and over again. Yeah.
I think Mark has BAE have an 11 space one.
Wow.
11 space rack. I mean, that's correct. That's crazy. So you can really.
Yeah, there's some concerns. There are concerns about that. There is a specification how much current each one of these slots can draw, and that is a concern, because some of the modules don't conform to that.
Oh, they don't?
No.
Right.
So they're relying on a rack that will supply that kind of current. So you should check that. It's 125 milliamps per slot.
Right.
That's why a double wide can use 2 slots, because it has 125 times 250 available.
Right.
To use.
Right.
So.
Well, that'd be interesting. So when you're selecting 500 series,
you should look at the current. Yeah, you should look at the current consumption. How much current?
Interesting.
Yeah, and that is what they call the VPR spec, and the API adheres to that. There are a lot of rack companies that beat that supply more current, and that's great. So that might be what you'd have to get, rather than the API one. Yeah.
So I think it's. That's the thing I recommend is if you can afford it at some point, get a 500 series rack, and then you're going to get a lot more choice of equipment, because as much as we love these individual units, you're paying for extra power supplies, extra casing.
Yeah, so you could have two, you always think in stereo, 2-track. I like to teach my students, you should get 2 of everything, because you may want to record stereo piano or stereo strings, whatever, stuff in stereo. So two mic pre's, 2 EQs, 2 compressors, something like that.
What's your go-to mic pre for vocals?
It would be either this or the RTZ. Generally, I would say for most singers, the RTZ, as I said, is like the world's best sounding Neve, and this is the API, world's best sounding API.
Right. I won't dispute that. I know the Sunset Sound pre's, so I could stand behind those.
I don't have an SSL rack. I don't have an SSL preamp, so I'll have to wait on that. But they make a good one too.
Yeah, good one too.
Your board sounds all right, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's great. I have so much front end with 312s, 1073s. I have a 12-channel Cadec console from the 70s.
Wow.
I'm so blessed. I have Crown mic pre's. I'm very blessed with front end. So my SSL is, some of my mixes through.
Yeah.
Now, talking of SSL.
Yep.
Let's move this chair out of the way.
Oh, the Sigma. Yeah, right here. So the Sigma, another unit I reviewed for mix, and I ran. Now the Sigma is a summing box, straight up. It takes 32 channels, actually 16 stereo pairs. They can be mono, but you lose one side. You can't have 32 monos. It has to be 16.
I see.
Stereo stems. So. The way that when I did the review is SSL lent me a pair of 16-channel MADI I/O boxes. So they're 1 rack space, so 32 channels of analog coming into this guy. And it has 2 stereo buses, and you're able to send, 24-bit, well actually, dithered down analog audio from Pro Tools into it, and sums inside of there. So for me, it sounds like an SSL board, straight up.
So does that mean, let's just say I insert on mix A and mix B, is it then summing those 2 internally back in?
You have the choice of setting the level for mix A, mix B, and then you can put B into A. I think that's one of these positions where I have to hold down something, but B into A. You can take mix B and put it into A.
Oh, I see. Right.
So,
and then
you select which mix the stem goes to over here. See. So I'd
be intrigued to see how that sounds. That was always the great thing about having multiple buses, and I think that was what made the 4000 so great. Is you could sit there and you could have 2 sets of compression going on and then put it back in, and it really glued the mixes together.
Yeah, you compress the track differently than the vocal stems. Yeah. That's a popular way. And
it's wonderful. And you're in love with this? You're getting some great results?
I love it. I have to get some more I/O to use it completely, but it takes a lot of I/O, so I need to get at least 2 more of these, or 2 or 32 channel I/O to use it properly. Right now, this is mostly going for the outboard gear in the rack.
Oh, I see. So you're using this on all your inserts.
Right. All the gear is inserted into Pro Tools. Yeah.
Is it 16 in and out you're running?
No, it's actually only 8 in and out, and then a stereo. Yeah, so I'm a little I/O challenged right now. So it's mostly in the box, and this stuff gets on the insert right now.
Wonderful. So, and then your controller, you're using the Crane Song here?
Avocet, Crane Song's biggest selling piece of gear is the Avocet. This is the original one. They have a new model out, the Model 2, which what he did was he improved the D to A converter in it. They have a digital input that you can supply whatever. I had my CD player connected digitally, or it could be your Pro Tools rig or whatever. Comes in AES EBU, and then you can just select it like that. Right now I have the CD player on that. The new model has a better D to A, but I don't use it anyway. I have my own D to A here, Benchmark, and an ADC, both Benchmark Media, which I clock Pro Tools from the A to D. And these are nice.
I don't know these well, so tell me a little bit about these.
Well, the ADC is their analog digital converter. It is a marvelous sounding box. Marvelous. And you just simply set the sample rate you want to work at up to 96, and give it analog input audio, which is what I get right from the APIs.
So this is where you're mixing to.
I could. Right now, I'm just in the box mixing.
Oh, I see.
So if I were to, when I use this, the analog output of this has to go into this to get back in the box, so that I can print it in Pro Tools if I were to do it that way. Or I used to have a 1-bit, Korg 1-bit DSD machine that I was mixing to, which Korg wanted back.
What did you think of that?
It's awesome. Really nice. The most analog sounding thing I have or had.
There was a lot of contention about this because I was mastering with Stephen Markison about 4 years ago when they were first talking about those Korg units, and a couple of, I won't just put it on him, a couple of mastering guys were a little skeptical about it.
Well, it was just out, and then the DSD, it's better now. Actually, I heard they actually have an editor. The problem was that you can't cut the stream like we can in Pro Tools, where we can. You can't do that with DSD.
I see.
So that was.
Yeah, I'm kind of clueless. I've never used one, so I'm not going to talk like an authority. Somebody had told me about it and maybe pitched it to me, and then I just started asking. I like to ask mastering guys what they think.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're the guys that are getting these incredibly massive files.
Stephen Marsh has been getting a lot of DSD files. So
I'd like to, what would be great for us to know is now taking ourselves to the end user, is like, what are the records that were done on DSD?
Well,
I'd like to, you know what I mean? I'd like to know.
There is a website called HD Tracks.
HD Tracks, okay.
And it's all high resolution audio. They have DSD, they have 96K, and they have all these records up there that you can stream or download.
What I'm thinking of, here's my question, and this I believe was Markison's point, is like, it's like you're keeping it at a higher quality for a longer period of time, but it's still eventually going to end up at 16-bit. What I'd like to know then, I think, is what are the records that were mixed to the DSD that we can then hear comparatively as a final like CD quality against something else? What is your feelings on that? I don't know the answer. I mean,
but there's so many ways that it can go wrong. It's hard to say that. I would say it's pointless to do it unless you keep it in that format.
I see. I think that was his kind of point.
Yeah. What's the point of, if it's going to end up as CD, what's the point? So the rule of thumb has always been that the quality of the master recording shall always be an order magnitude better than the consumer. And of course, that's sort of flipped around nowadays.
Sure.
Because you can have consumer formats that sound way better than a CD.
Right, absolutely.
Even vinyl, you could argue, vinyl, at least the first time you play it, on a perfect deck, you know. But so there's so many ways it can go wrong.
We have so many discussion points down here of different opinions.
There are so, I mean, it's not, he's right about it. What's the point unless you can keep it as DSD? Right. And there are some releases that are only high definition DSD or 96. Only.
And what's that website called again?
HD Tracks.
HD Tracks.
And I can tell you that if to experience DSD, then you will need a special DAC, a digital analog converter, and I happen to have one that plugs into the USB, and it will decode PCM, you know, up to 96, 192, and also DSD, both double precision. Wow. So, and you plug it in, and it has a headphone.
We'll have to have a whole other discussion.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk about what you're monitoring with. Now, you like the Adams?
I've had these for years. It's sort of like what I have right now. In this room, I've got the room sounding without any EQ or any correction. I used to use correction, but the room is so close now that these speakers sound pretty decent in here. They didn't always sound pretty decent in here. So I think a lot of people make judgments about speakers in poor rooms. These are working, you know. I'd like to get some better ones, sure. And these are a bit long in the tooth, and I don't even think I make them.
I'm not an expert in anything.
Yeah.
I just know, my personal opinion is, if you know your speakers and you know your room.
You're right. Yeah. These have the ribbon tweeters. I was attracted to them when I mixed something on the smaller ones. I think they're called the S2.0s, which were smaller. And the ribbon tweeter, and I just thought, wow, you know, I was at a place called Firehouse in Pasadena studio, and I was mixing some stuff in there, and I never saw these speakers before. And I said, well, that's what I'm using. I'm not one of these people that will fuss over and rent something, whatever. I'll just say, well, that's what they have. That's what I'm using. And I just forgot about it and mixed on them, took it home, and I had a pair of old JBLs here at home. And I go, wow, that's kind of like what I wanted. So I went and got them in here, the little ones that I'd mixed on, but they just didn't have enough
oomph.
Yeah, they're too small.
Too small, right.
And so I was able to bump to these. David Bryce worked at Adams at that time, and he was very accommodating, and he said, well, okay, no problem. And he brought these over. These are 9-inch woofers. So,
great.
And I'm using a sub now.
And you have the Yamahas over here. Is this sort of your edit suite or your keyboard suite?
The thinking on this was that when you have the Yamahas in the same area like this, and you have the screen and everything, and to me it was always, first of all, they're in the way. First of all, and like Eric Zobler, my friend Eric Zobler, he had the Yamahas down like this, which I always thought was the coolest thing. And I said, he says, yeah, they sound like crap otherwise. And so he was getting, because they were closer to the floor in his furniture, he was getting a little bass build.
Oh, I see.
Down there. But I said, wow, Eric, that's really cool because they're out of the way of your mains. They're down here, you know, so you can go back and forth. And that's really cool. Well, obviously I don't have that. I can't do that here. Right. So I said, I need a different venue for my NS10s, meaning that I can just swing around now. They're at my head height, they're not in the way of the mains, and I'm looking at something different, you know.
Right.
For me,
that's
it's
great.
Working, yeah. It's working pretty
Very
well.
Smart. What's this little?
Oh, it's just something I got at the swap meet.
I see.
So I thought about getting a little amp and nothing.
It looks great though.
Yeah, it looks very official.
A Misco, and this is a little speaker?
It's I probably came from a cop car or something,
Cool.
You know, it's just a little stupid thing, you know.
We could have. This is how he checks all his mixes. You see. If it sounds good on here, it's going to be a number one record.
Yeah. No. On what's that thing called? It's a Menisco, or what is it?
Misco or Misco. Misco or Misco, depending.
Misco rocks.
So a quick. Have a quick look at your.
Sure. All right. So we're in a space. This is a small room. It's only 9.5 feet wide here, and your typical 8-foot ceiling. So in small rooms, the dominant problem is the bass in small rooms. So what I've done here is I've have to use heavy bass trapping to take care of the room modes, which are peaks and dips in the response and the low frequencies based upon the dimensions of the room. So with an 8-foot ceiling, I have what's called an axial vertical room mode at about 70 hertz. And that means that at 50% of that distance, I'm either going to have a huge peak or a huge dip at 70. Well, it's about 4 feet, which is about the height of your head when you're sitting in the chair mixing.
Oh, I see.
And the same issue side to side, you have a lateral room mode, also axial at 50%, and it happens to be a 9.5, so it's a little bit lower frequency, not much. So at that frequency, the first room mode frequency, I have a dip or a peak also at 50%, also the listening position. So what do? You have to put in bass traps. And that's what these are. These are made by GIK Acoustics. They're called Monsters. They are bass traps. They have slats, they call a scatter shield. So there's a hard and then a soft. And so they trap the bass inside. They're tilted down like that towards the speaker. So the distance from the ceiling is greater. And then the scatter plate distributes the high frequencies in a more random way, like these curved. These are called convex diffusers, and they're also bass traps. So that's doing that. And the rest of the panels are absorption. The ones in the corners are diffusion. They're hybrid diffusion and bass traps and absorption. So,
and then the panel there's 2 panels behind here, on top of the speakers.
Yeah, those over here are in the corner. The front are a diffusive, and then the slots absorb bass inside. They're in the corner. Corners are points, and you can walk around in here. Like if you stand here and talk, like I'm talking, and you go over here, it's like a dramatic change in the sound. But they are diffusers and absorbers in one. So they're also GIK.
What are these about?
Those are diffusers. Those are a quadratic residue diffuser, which is what these are, and a quadratic disperses the sound in a random way based on number theory, but that doesn't matter. But anyway, what happens is the sound goes into those, so are those on the back wall. Those are also Auralex diffusers. So the idea is that apart from instead of a hard wall where the sound is pretty much goes off like a mirror. When you shine a flashlight in a mirror, the light goes in and it goes out at an angle. This disperses the angle, spreads the angle out, and you get more of a random sound. So if you talk, can you hear the difference?
Oh, massive. I don't know if our little, we got, what are these? We're using the Rode wireless system.
Right.
The Rode wireless system, it's here, it's like, ha da 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 do da 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 da. I mean, it's completely different here.
So the goal with a room like this is that you don't want it too dead, and that's the purpose of the hardwood floor. I used to have carpet, and it was way too dead. So I had the floor redone, but you want that balance. Otherwise, it's not realistic. So of course, you have carpet out there, but so that's the thinking there, and they also behind these curtains came from Kendon, I believe. They're like from the 70s, but behind these are 4 inches of absorption, because the curtain like that is nothing for, a little bit of high frequency change, but everything else goes right through it.
Okay, so this has got nothing to do with audio. Well, I suppose it does in some ways, because you built this.
Yeah.
I just saw this and I started asking questions. So Barry, tell us about this.
This is not a bomb. It is a digital clock that I built, believe it or not, in 1967 with leftover parts when I worked at an electronic company. You can see, and it actually still works, if you can believe that. These are called.
What year did you build this?
1967.
Wow.
It has it has the same output. This is a power in the power supply. This is the same transistor used in a Neve module or preamp. It's the exact same transistor. So it is a 24-hour clock. As you can see, it's reading the time of day right now, 11:05. So at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it would be 13. If that makes sense. A 24-hour clock. So these are Nixie tubes. They run on high voltage. The rest of the circuit is on a plug-in card. They call it prototype. Look how cruddy old this thing is. And
I must say that this is actually an accurate time, where this clock over here is actually telling an hour out.
is it?
Yeah, this one. So his 1967 built clock is actually telling the right time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
iPhone time.
iPhone time is, you can barely see on there, but there's actually telling the right time, where the brand new...
Yeah, that's got, I noticed that. Something's wrong with that clock.
But that's nice. So this 1967 technology is more accurate.
It used to be inside of a friend built a wooden pirate chest, for lack of a better word, all like a treasure chest, and it had a red window in it, and this thing sat in it.
So these are NASA parts?
It's all left over. That transformer that's humming right now, these are all reject parts and pilfered parts when I worked for NASA, going through college when I worked at nights.
That's wonderful. There's nothing cooler than talking about NASA in 1967.
Yeah.
That just pretty much beats anything. We can talk about music all day, but when you're talking about NASA in the late 60s,
it's fascinating stuff. Back then I was working night shift and going to college in the daytime, and the quality assurance, where you put your stamp on that part and say, yeah, this is good, and the rest of the time I build stuff.
That's fantastic.
Okay, so this one here is the show and tell, my first number 1, 1972. You can see the old style. I did the Daryl Hall, John Oates album. It had Sarah Smile was the single. That's the album
there.
And there's the Leonard Skinner album, Street Survivors. Wonderful. The original cover I actually have it probably somewhere around in here. Yeah, here's the original cover. This is the collector's item. This came out a week after the plane went down. Oh. And they, of course, had to pull it. They pulled it, and they blew up the back picture and put it on the front. So this is
wow.
And another thing that I had on kind of interesting, here's the track sheets.
You have the track sheets from when you...
Copies of the track sheet. Here is That Smell. This one I put on my Facebook page. Actually has my original phone number. Maybe we'll put my finger over it. It's still the same phone number. But
really?
It's 213, yeah.
Oh, before they went to 323.
Yeah, it was 213 then. So that's the...
Every Leonard Skinner fan in the world's going to be calling you now. I saw his number.
So yeah, that was... unfortunate things. It's too bad. And all of it, the guitar player, Stevie Gaines, fantastic player. Really good. You'd love this the way he played Stratocaster. Oof, really nice, really good. And so it was a sad thing. I did a Waylon Jennings album. I got a Grammy nomination for this one, which is a West Side Story tribute. All these artists were on it. Phil Collins, Natalie Cole,
Chick Corea, Aretha Franklin.
Yeah. So I was star-studded.
And the Jerky Boys.
And the Jerky Boys. The Jerky Boys had an appearance, And Little Richard, got to record him. That was something. He's something. This is a record I did with Rod for when Princess Di. We were working on his record, and they asked for a tribute. We did a song, and
so it's with Rod Stewart.
Yeah. So Rod is singing a song for that record, and this is a British boy band, BB Mac.
I remember BB Mac. Yeah.
Yeah. And then over here, there's the Skinnerd. And the Cores, you probably heard of the Cores.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. And then back here, kind of hidden, is Enrique Iglesias' first record when he was about 18.
Oh, wow, he was only 18 there?
Yeah. So it was all fun.
And the Grammy nominations up on the wall?
Yeah, those are, we call those I call them paper Grammys, meaning they, recognition for your participation as engineer, meaning it not one for engineering. It's because I worked on a Grammy-winning record, so I was one of the troops. I don't have one for engineering. Those are rare as hen's teeth when you think about it.
Right.
There's only one.
There's only one
non-classical per year, non-classical.
And recently, I could be wrong, but recently they've been giving them to artists that are engineering their own record.
Oh, well, being a lifetime voting member, I vote on that stuff. So
Me too.
You see that, yeah. So
Wonderful.
so
Barry, thank you ever so much.
you're welcome anytime.
You do know in England that's Bazza. Did you ever?
I know that. I've heard that before. I have an English producer I worked with, and he was always calling me Bazza.
Oi, Bazza.
And so did Rod Stewart.
He called you Bazza?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, in Warren in England is Wazza.
Wazza.
Wazza. My mum used to call me Wazza. My mum called me Wazza.
Wazza with a Wazza.
I don't know why I said that, because now every freaking comment I ever going to get now is going to be, oi, Wazza.
Interesting to know the kind of the why that is. The Zuzza. Why the Zuzza? The Wazza, the Zuzza.
Darren's, Dazza, Daz, Waz. I used to get called Waz, which is not good. But anyway, yeah, there's lots of them. I can deal with it. Thank you ever so much for showing us around.
You're welcome.
Giving us a great overview. I love I love the acoustic treatment stuff as well, because I get asked about that all the time.
Yeah.
And
It's important. It is important. It makes your stuff sound as best it can be in the room, and I think it's just important that your monitors in your room aren't lying to you, so you can mix. Yeah.
And I love the fact that you have a great choice amount of equipment.
It's eclectic, isn't it?
It's eclectic, but the stuff that I do know, which of course is the Sunset Sound stuff, the retro stuff, the 1176 and the 165, I use those all the time.
Good stuff. Good stalwarts.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are always in every mix, always.
Yeah, and I think that's great. It's great to have the affirmation, and there's just things that are fantastic, and finding out about new pieces of equipment as well is great for me.
Yeah. If you want to try out any of this stuff, like the MW1 or something, or the variable impedance, the Ingram.
Great. Well, I look forward to doing more with you. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
So thanks for watching. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing as ever. Please leave loads of questions and comments below. Like you always do, I really appreciate all your positive feedback and the way that you're creating a wonderful community here. And if there's anything specific, I'll even text or call up Barry and ask him if it's something I can't answer. Thanks, Barry.
You got it. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks.